Love horror? I do. Welcome to Love Horror Podcast. Okay, in this episode we're going to talk about a classic horror comedy that is really good, at least in my opinion, but it's one that is kind of a cult classic, but yet many people may not have seen it or heard of it, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, and also towards the end I'll give you some trivia about the movie. And this is going to be a relatively short podcast this time, just to tell you a little bit about this movie. And I think if you haven't watched it, you should watch it, especially during this time where we're all in lockdown, you know, and looking for things perhaps to do, perhaps movies you haven't seen before to watch. Okay, Night of the Living I'm thinking of Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Creeps, which is clearly a bit of a takeoff of Night of the Living Dead title, it was made in 1986. And a bit of trivia for you now is interestingly the year I was born. But okay, I'll tell you a little bit about Night of the Creeps. It is a science fiction horror comedy, and it is the directorial debut for this director, who's Fred Dekker. It stars Jason Lively, I think I'm saying that right, Jill Whitlow and Tom Atkins. Now, Tom Atkins is a horror favourite. You should already have know about him if you're a horror fan. He was in the 1980 John Carpenter movie The Fog. He even appeared in Escape from New York and Creepshow and Halloween Part 3 Season of the Witch, which I know is not exactly many Halloween fans' favourites. That is the one, in case you don't know, that was set in a toy factory, you know, that made Halloween masks and things like that, and a lot of witchcraft type of stuff going on, you know, involving the rock from Stonehenge and all, and you've probably seen it if you're a real horror fan, especially if you have seen the Halloween movies. But yeah, he was the lead actor in Halloween 3 and The Fog, so I'm sure you've seen those. Interestingly, if you've seen it, he was also in the 1988 movie Maniac Cop. But anyway, enough about that particular actor. The fact of the matter is, he is in this movie, which I think actually helps this movie a bit. You know, it's nice to have a familiar face in it. This film, interestingly, is one of the earliest attempts at a B-movie and a homage to the kind of B-movie genre. And to cut a long story short, it's kind of a comedy zombie movie, but they're not traditional zombies because of the science fiction element. Well, the main plot does relate to zombie-like creatures. It also mixes in a few other horror favourites such as slashers and alien invasion films, and it is just really worth a watch. Even if maybe you don't like it, you know, maybe you won't, but it's definitely worth one watch, you know. And it is available on iTunes, and it's even finally available on the UK iTunes store now, because I gather up my collection of movies now digitally, and I'm trying to keep them all on iTunes, and unfortunately this one wasn't on there for ages, but finally it is now if you're interested. Not too shockingly, it didn't perform well at the box office. But like many movies, especially horror movies, things like that don't perform well in the box office at their time, it did develop quite a cult following in later years, probably mostly when it came out on VHS. It only made around $600,000 in the box office. I'm not sure yet what the budget was, but by the end of this podcast, if I find it on the net, I'll let you know. There is, by the way, I'm not going to give spoilers, I'm not going to give away the endings or anything like that, but there is two endings. There was a theoretical release ending and then an alternative ending by the director. Now, did it ever have a sequel? Well, yes and no. There was a movie that was called Zombie Town in the 2000s, and I will find that out, the date of that, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there is a movie called Zombieland in the 2000s, and originally as it was in production, it was to be called Night of the Creeps 2 Zombie Town in Germany, funnily enough. I think it might be a German company that made it, but basically it was going to be called Night of the Creeps 2 Zombie Town, and I'm glad they didn't, because I don't remember it all that well. But I did see it initially when the movie first came out, and I do remember I think it was like an okay low budget movie, but it certainly didn't live up to the quality of the original and the kind of the sense of humour and the kind of budget as well. It was too low budget, and it just didn't feel enough like a decent sequel to Night of the Creeps. So I'm actually very glad that in the end they dropped the Night of the Creeps 2 title, and maybe eventually somebody, even if it is straight to DVD or whatever, straight to digital, things like that, hopefully somebody will actually do, even if it's a low budget, a decent sequel that feels more like a proper sequel and homage to the original. And by the way, in case you're interested, that did come out in 2007, so longer ago than I thought. I would have guessed around 2011, but it's 2007. And if you're interested in Zombie Town, check it out, especially if you have seen the original. I'd recommend, just because it was intended as a sequel, just to check it out, what's the harm? By the way, the lead actor in this, Jason Lively, you have probably seen him as well. I'm trying to kind of see as I record this what you might know him from, because he's definitely somebody you'd recognize the face of if you watch this. Yeah, he was actually in, I don't know if you've seen these movies, but the vacation movies, the National Lampoon Vacation movies, he was the son in National Lampoon's European Vacation, so that's probably where I've seen him. He did appear in a pilot episode apparently of Dukes of Hazzard as well when he was just 10 years old, out of interest, a bit of trivia there for you. So yeah, actually I just having a quick look here, I'm not seeing a lot I would know him from, but yeah, I guess it's probably from a Vacation. In fact, in the 2015 reboot of Vacation, there was a cameo of him, but showing like old footage from European Vacation as well. So if you've seen the reboot of Vacation from 2015, you may have seen clips of him in that as well. By the way, if you look at the cast list for this movie, you actually notice the characters' names are homages to various horror directors. So for example, Jason Lively's character is called Chris Romero, which is obviously a reference to George A. Romero. Another actor is called J.C. Hooper, and that is also a reference to being, because his name's James, but Carpenter, which of course his name wasn't James, but still the Carpenter is a reference to John Carpenter, and the Hooper is a reference to the other director. And there's also a character here, let me see, called, there's a Detective Landis, that's another director, a Sergeant Raimi, of course from the Evil Dead movies, the director of those, and also he did Drag Me to Hell and various other ones as well. And let me have a look a little bit here at the names. There's a Todd, that's Todd Hooper. Well, yeah, anyway, the main characters anyway have names that are references to various horror directors, which I think's a good idea. Originally, the director, Fred Decker, wanted the movie to be shot in black and white. According to Wikipedia, he included every B-movie cliche he could think of and insisted on directing the script himself. The script was also only written in a week. Now, it says that he wanted to shoot the film in black and white. Well, interestingly, there are some flashback scenes to back I think it was probably the 1950s, and those are still in black and white. Then when it goes to present day, it's in colour. So he kind of got his way a little bit there, but it wasn't overkill. You just have the flashback scenes in black and white, and I think that's probably the best way to have done it. The movie currently on Internet Movie Database has a rating of 6.8, which so about 7, which actually isn't bad considering it's probably a acquired taste. If you like horrors but don't like weird comedy ones or whatever, you aren't going to like this. If you like comedies but don't like horrors, of course, and it's certainly not going to be for you. So I can understand, especially being an older movie, why it hasn't got exactly a perfect rating, but still nearly 7 out of 10 isn't dire. It also has a Metacritic score of 62, which for Metacritic I don't think is dire either. Now if we just have a quick look at the director, he's not a name I'm overly familiar with, but looking at some of what he's known for on Internet Movie Database, he actually has done a few things of note. He did the Monster Squad, the 1987 movie Monster Squad. Well, he wrote it anyway. RoboCop 3, which isn't exactly a wonderful credit to his name or his abilities, because if you've seen the RoboCop movies and you like RoboCop 3 was a bit of a disaster, and in my mind terribly written. Then he's also known for being the writer of the 2018 version of The Predator. He is also, for us horror fans of interest, he's written 4 episodes of the series of Tales from the Crypt. He wrote Split Personality, Lower Berth, The Thing from the Grave, Only Sin Deep, and All Through the House. He also wrote the second House movie. I'm not sure if you've seen those. Those are probably something I could make podcast episodes about, or a episode about in the future. But for now, I'll just briefly say that he wrote the second House movie, and there's like 3 or 4 of them, and he wrote House 2, the second story. In fact, actually, from the look of it, he also might have written the first House movie, but then I don't see the third one on here. He's mostly written stuff. He hasn't actually directed a huge amount, but interestingly, he did direct the episode The Thing from the Grave of Tales from the Crypt, and also he directed RoboCop 3 and The Monster Squad, as well as Night of the Creeps. Okay, let's have a look at the trivia section and see what we can find in the way of interest and trivia. Interestingly, I was mentioning Tom Atkins, who was from things like Halloween 3. He says that this is the favourite movie he's been in, and I can definitely see why. I think this probably is the best movie he's been in as well. In a scene in the movie, there is graffiti on the wall of the men's room where JC is trying to escape the slug creatures that are trying to turn him into a zombie. The graffiti says "Go Monster Squad," which of course is a reference to the 87 movie The Monster Squad, which was also directed and written by Fred Dekker. You'll see the house mother in the University College is watching a movie at one point, and she is watching Plan 9 from Outer Space, the 1959 movie Plan 9 from Outer Space. A good portion of this film was shot in an old Woolworths department store that was converted into a makeshift studio for this. Even the name of the university in this movie is a reference to a director. The university is called Corman University, and this is a reference to Roger Corman. Tom Atkins himself came up with an idea to have the detective stop and smell a rose in one particular scene, so that was a bit of improv basically on Tom Atkins' part. I'm not going to give away exactly what this is, but the tool shed sequence was filmed after principal shooting on the movie had wrapped. Basically, they showed a rough cut to a test audience, and they thought there should be more action sequences in the movie. Although, of course, it's not exactly an action movie, but of course, you want a movie to be fast paced, and adding a little bit of action in there can help with that, I guess. As well as Tom Atkins saying that this is his favourite movie he's worked on, he also said that Fred Dekker, the director, is one of the very few directors he's worked with that he'd still love to work with again to this day. The college football team, the Bulldogs, were named in a tribute to the director Fred Dekker's actual high school football team. Fred Dekker, the director, his roommate Shane Black actually worked on the script. The next year, Tom Atkins starred in Lethal Weapon, Black's first produced screenplay. There is one more bit of interesting trivia here, but it's a spoiler, so unfortunately you have to watch the movie if you haven't already and look at this up yourself. Okay, there's also a list of things that went wrong when they were making this, little goofs and stuff, but I think that might be on the realms of being a spoiler, so let's skip over that for now. Okay, so I think that's about it. Basically, I've told you a general idea of what it is, a bit of trivia, and I recommend that you go and watch this now. It is, even here in the UK, it is now readily available. You can get it on DVD. I think you can get it on Blu-ray even here, and you can certainly get it digitally, at least on iTunes now, because I finally got it on the UK iTunes, and I also think it's out on iTunes in some other countries, certainly in the US anyway. So go and grab yourself a copy or rent it. In fact, I really think it's worth buying, and check it out because it is a really good comedy horror. They did such a good job with this. It's such a good homage and takeoff of classic zombie movies, but also, like I've mentioned, with elements of slashers and other things in it, and they have done a really good job. It's one of the most probably perfect comedy homages to zombie movies that I have seen, and there have been a few. There have actually been quite a few. This is certainly one of the better ones. So this is Night of the Creeps from 1986. Go check it out. I highly recommend it. And please keep checking my podcast, because every so often I will bring out another episode, hopefully in the future, either with guests on here or with interviews again. And if you haven't seen some of my older episodes, there's 17 or 18 other episodes previously, including a couple where I interview independent filmmakers, and I think that's definitely worth listening to and checking out. So please keep an eye out for future podcasts, and also check out my previous podcasts, and I'll see you next time. Bye.